Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
All right, so Joe Rogan had another Epstein defending hack on his podcast. This guy's name is Shellenberger. He appears to be like a San Francisco type of dude. He's written books about the decline of San Francisco and about how the left is breaking reality and stuff like that. This conversation actually takes on a very interesting pace because they start by talking about Iran. And they're talking about Trump's policy in Iran and how it's like probably not going to work and how it seems like a really bad idea. And he's been talking about that lately. And then he pivots right away into talking about more domestic issues. So then he goes into all his normal stuff about immigration and fraud in the government. And these are the things that he's been talking about lately and narrativizing about. And then, so they talk about that for most of the episode instead of the war. But then they eventually get to Epstein, and that's where the debate happens. So the thing I want to highlight here, and this is a longer clip that I'm going to play with from Joe, because what I want to highlight here is that while Joe is pushing back on this guy, there's also a developing of a narrative in Joe's brain that you can kind of watch in real time. I've watched enough of his content to sort of see where this stuff is all going, and you see a lot of clips from people want to post this or that and say, Rogan said this about Iran. Rogan says Trump's base has lost faith in him and stuff like that. People are using Rogan's words to try to like drive the wedge against Trump, which I think is a good thing to do, except for the fact that Rogan's mind on this stuff is not really changing. And that's what I'm kind of keeping track of in all of these narratives that he's putting together. Just showing those little parts where he says a little thing about how Trump's base feels betrayed ignores the fact that by and large, Rogan is taking in all of the anti-left narratives that are coming from the Trump administration and allies of theirs and using that to essentially form the narrative of his podcast. So that is only going to lead to a place that paves the way for more right-wing politicians and policy. So that's what I want to use this Epstein conversation to highlight. But here's him talking to Shellenberger.
Then on the other side, these protests are organized. They're organized and they're paid for, which is also something to be that people need to understand. These are not organic protests. It's not organic that it just happened to be taking place in the very same place where you found hundreds of millions of dollars in fraud, right? This is one of the clearest, most obvious distractions you've ever seen, like in the public arena, like where you have these people who are being paid to protest. They give them money to go out there and protest. They give them signs. They're organizing it. They have a signal group. Mike Benz was talking about it, and he was essentially saying it's a mathematical thing, and that if you have these things play out, you're going to have a certain amount. It was Mike Benz, right? It was saying that? It was a certain amount of people you're going to have incidences. You're just playing it out over the numbers. Certain amount of these protests. You have organized protests, you have untrained ICE agents, you have a lot of chaos, you have support for people screaming in the streets, someone gets shot, boom, and then it moves the needle. And this is calculated.
Yes.
They want this to happen. They want it to happen this way because then this kills all the support for people that, we're kind of on the fence whether or not ICE should be deporting all illegals. I think they wanted to do something about the amount of illegal fraud that was just recently exposed in Minneapolis.
But I don't know but you wouldn't do it with ICE raids, though. I mean,
well, it's illegal immigrants. If you have illegal immigrants that are responsible for hundreds of millions of dollars in fraud, and at least some of them are illegal, it seems rational that you would send ICE in to find out who's illegal and who's not and put a stop to some of it. And there's also this nationwide focus on this one place because of the Nick Shirley videos.
Yeah. Are you Christian?
Well, I go to church, and I have been for quite a while.
Okay. So
I've been doing it for the last 3 or 4 years.
But that's not really an answer to the question.
Well, because I don't know. I think it's very interesting, and I do believe that if you follow the teachings of Jesus Christ, you will live a better life. I really do believe that.
There's other ones, like people are like the jerky is like cannibalism and whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, well, it didn't help that the restaurant owner was like, the restaurant's name was like Cannibal and something.
Yeah.
But I'm skeptical that that's what that was. So.
Well, you would be skeptical unless you were part of some of these fucking bizarre satanic rituals, and then you would go, oh my God, it's real. Like look, people have sacrificed people, right? Could we agree to that in human history?
Yeah,
in history?
sure, of course.
And there have been satanic rituals throughout history. Can we agree to that?
Sure.
Okay. So there has been cannibalism in history. We agree to that? Okay.
Unfortunately, a lot, actually. There was a lot, yeah.
Why wouldn't we think they're talking about that? We don't want to believe it, right? Is that what it is?
No,
we don't want to believe that these people, these multimillionaires and billionaires that go to this island and engage in all this crazy shit aren't doing something like child sacrifice or cannibalism.
Well, let's start with the thing that I think a lot of us thought it was, which is that it was an intelligence community sex blackmail operation. That's what made it, for me, a story.
We're very limited in the amount of data that we possess, right? Because we just have emails between him and other people. Inside those emails, we find a lot of creepy shit. We find that one description where he was talking to this woman, where she said, "I'm investigating a story about an island where they bring children for sex," and he goes, "She almost had a heart attack when I told her that person is me."
But that's very much in his style. I mean, look. Let's back up to the intelligence.
But wait a minute. Why would you dismiss that?
We can pull it up and look at it. I just think, I think what we see from the files. And I think Mike Benz has sort of pointed out the ways in which Epstein might have been a contractor or a financier or somebody hiding money for the intelligence community. Beyond that, I don't see any evidence that he was doing much for the intelligence community, if at all.
Also, the lady who was the guard deposited money into her account.
I saw that, but that doesn't. What does that mean?
Okay, well,
I mean, in other words,
she also Googled his name before he died.
All that's totally
okay, but
it's like, let me Scooby-Doo
why are you dismissing? I don't understand why you're dismissing this. Because if you're going to pay,
I'm not dismissing it. I'm saying,
but hold on, you are. But hold on, you are, because if you do have a guard, and all of a sudden this guard acquires several payments. She made several deposits. One of them was $5,000 just 10 days before he died, and then the cameras are cut. And then this guy hangs himself while he's on suicide watch?
Now remember, he tried to commit suicide.
I understand, but why are you not letting me finish what I'm saying?
Sorry.
Because that alone is weird. That alone is weird. That the cameras are cut, that there's no video of it. The whole thing is weird. You don't think it's weird?
Well,
You don't think it's weird that this guy, that he just finds a way to hang himself in this cage?
I thought I had that same story. I was like, the cameras are cut, the security guards are asleep.
All those things are true.
All those things are true. It's also true that the cameras went out a long time before that night. It didn't just go out that night before. Security guards fall asleep at night all the time. He attempted suicide, I believe 18 days before.
18 days before, he said that his roommate tried to kill him. Did you know that? Do you know his roommate was a cop that had killed 4 people in contract killings? He said that guy tried to kill him, and they found him unresponsive 18 days before. He said that guy tried to kill him.
And couldn't he have lied about that?
That guy was trying to get money.
Couldn't he have
All
lied
right,
about
so
that?
at first there, Joe is talking about this thing that he said a bunch of times about the fraud in Minnesota and how the protests that happened as a result of the 2 ICE killings in Minnesota have all been sort of like non-organically propped up and organized by mysterious forces. He has said this a bunch of times and never has given any proof. Occasionally, Jamie will pull up something to fact check Joe, or Joe will say, let's put this into the AI, whatever. But he has said this, I think 4 or 5 times I've heard him say this, and he has not ever presented a single piece of information. It is only ever just what he says about it. And so he's saying something very specific. He's saying that these protests are not organic, they are fully organized and funded. And he keeps referencing this thing about signal chats, which I think there was like a conversation or maybe multiple that involved, I don't know, Democratic politicians or something like that involving the protests. Really not that crazy. If there was evidence that money was being dumped into these protests to oppose the Trump administration, we would be seeing that evidence, but there's no evidence of it. And he references this guy Mike Benz by saying that Benz said that there's a sort of mathematical certainty to the fact that when you have all of these different factors like ICE being untrained and all these people that are upset about ICE, and so the situation escalates, etc. They have guns, illegal immigrants, blah blah blah. You essentially can simulate a level of certainty that something's going to happen at a certain point. So the way Joe Rogan interprets that, I don't know if this is exactly what Mike Benz said, but he interprets that to mean that somebody ran all of these calculations about what would happen in Minnesota if these ICE agents were there and agitated and blah blah blah, and that it was all calculated to create the pushback against ICE, to solidify the narrative against ICE, and to distract from the fraud. That is completely charitably Joe Rogan's position. He believes that it was controlled to that extent. Not that the government knew that it would create chaotic conditions in Minnesota, and so they sent feds in there with guns who are not well trained, and that is what created the chaos. That's kind of like the obvious position. That's not what he's saying. He's saying that it is the forces that oppose ICE that are so powerful that behind the scenes they have funded and propped up this pushback to ICE. And he does say that ICE is not well trained and that these agents are not behaving themselves well. So I don't really know how that's supposed to fit into it. But again, once again, Trump and his entire administration are just kind of like weak and feckless in the face of the giant mysterious forces of the Democrats that control everything. So that's kind of the basis that he's operating from. And then he says this thing about Christianity, and he's talking more about Jesus these days. He's talking more about the Bible, and he's not fully proselytizing or necessarily saying this or that about God, but he is latching onto the narratives of Christianity. And he says things in this interview like, there's no raping or killing in the Christian ideology, but you have that in other religions like Muslims, which is a complete distortion. I mean, to say there's no raping and killing in the Bible, even God directing people to murder is in the Bible. But he's talking about the teachings of Jesus specifically. So classic Christian cherry picking, and you can see the direction he's going, right? He wants to latch onto these narratives because it leads to a more positive way of life. So the way that connects to these Epstein things, because I think that's a valid thing to believe. I don't really care if people are Christian or if you think the teachings of Jesus are valid or a solution to your problems, that's fine, go for it. But when it ties in with the Epstein stuff, and I think it ties in with the rest of his beliefs, because once he's talking about Epstein, the first thing he brings up is rituals and cannibalism. And this is what I said about Tim Dillon. Candace Owens is also going in this direction of fully buying into the idea of like demons and sacrifice and ritual sacrifice, and that's what was going on Epstein's island. So there is some speculation about cannibalism. Some of the key words that were used in some of these emails, like jerky and pizza, specifically in the case of jerky, it seems like they were referencing something that was being eaten, that because of the way other food words seem to be used to reference children, people are saying that this is a reference to eating people. So I think that's possible. There's definitely enough evidence in the files that you could look at that and say, that kind of looks like what they're talking about. Some kind of weird experiments they were doing. Even if it wasn't eating people, they had some kind of like special food that Epstein was eating or something like that. So it's kind of reasonable to speculate that that might cross over with some of the sick shit that he was doing, or that they might be directly referencing kids in some of these instances. But what there is not a single shred of evidence of in these files that we've seen or anything in the past when it comes to Epstein is this stuff about rituals and sacrifice. There's not a shred of evidence of that anywhere in the files, and that's why they don't bring it up here. Joe Rogan doesn't say anything about that specifically. It's just the vague gesture. Same thing with Tim Dillon. He vaguely gestures about this stuff about Moloch and Baal. He's talking about completely separate theories that in some cases overlap with some of these stories about powerful people, but not really. And if anybody can prove me wrong and show me that there is evidence in the Epstein files, even a little bit, that this has something to do with ritual sacrifice, other than one single typo in an email that says BAAL and nothing else relating to demons whatsoever, then show me that. Show me that evidence. But you can see that Joe Rogan has completely bought into that. And he's saying that that's built into the conspiracy. He says this weird thing that I don't quite understand about, like, if you were one of the people participating in these satanic rituals, then you would recognize it and say that that's what this is. I don't really know what exactly he meant by that, but it's clear that he is taking that to be true. And the reason that that is a red herring is because, first of all, again, if there's evidence of that, then I will incorporate that into my analysis about Epstein. But it goes back to what I've said about this over and over, which is that people are using the Epstein thing to kind of verify whatever their beliefs are. And it's also true with hacks like this guy, who are using it to solidify his belief that there is nothing that crazy about what was going on with Epstein. And the reason he's coming to that conclusion is because he, like Joe, knows some of these people. He's in some of these circles with Silicon Valley people and people from San Francisco, and so he's creating a version of this narrative that kind of makes it less conspiratorial, makes it less like there was misbehavior afoot that these very powerful people knew about. There wasn't really trafficking going on, there wasn't really a murder that took place instead of his suicide, and all of that is kind of overblown. And again, he's just confirming his own bias based on little bits and pieces that he sees in the files. That's what we're all going to do to a certain extent. And the reason that going in this religious direction, and you can clearly see Rogan is going that way in general, is that it's not going to lead to any type of solution to this problem. The solution to the problem of Epstein and elites is not spiritual warfare or holy war. If you think it is, then go fight in the war in Iran, sign up, enlist so that others don't have to do it, and go fight your holy war. But the reality is that if we want to solve this problem, we've got to look at it more practically, and we got to look at it in terms of what these people are actually doing and how they were able to get away with it. And so again, I'm not ruling out the idea that religious rituals or whatever play into it. I just haven't seen that, so I'm not going to put any focus into that. And instead, what I want to focus on is the fact that people like this are able to accrue a huge amount of money, and because they have so much money, in some cases their power kind of outweighs or is able to outmaneuver the power of various governments throughout the world. And that's how Epstein is able to skirt international law and also act as sort of a intelligence broker and, collecting data on different people that were coming to his island. Whether we've seen that in the files or not, we can know pretty much with certainty that Epstein was collecting information on the people that he was hanging out with. That's true. That's just a thing he was doing. So it seems to me like what's emerging in Joe Rogan, it's actually anti-populist, despite the fact that these guys view themselves as populist. It's an emergence of a new type of elite that is more on this right-leaning libertarian side that truly believe in just the accruing of almost infinite wealth because they view that as kind of like the engine of society. And Joe Rogan is becoming much more sympathetic to that perspective. He bristles a lot at any type of policy about taxation in California, taxation in New York, because he views it as just a vehicle for this fraud that is taking place in, again, immeasurable fashion. This is billions of dollars that are without proof, he's claiming, as disappearing into like vast entities that are then going on to fund protests in order to bring down ICE or whatever. So that's the kind of worldview, the conception of the world that he's coming up with. And the problem with that is that there's no way to go after people who have done what Epstein has done without government power. There's no entity powerful enough to hold these people accountable other than the collective power of the American people or other people elsewhere in the world. And in theory, that's what the government is. That's what the government represents, is the people. So the only way to hold incredibly powerful people accountable for these crimes is with collective power through the government. Joe Rogan is becoming increasingly anti-collectivist, and anytime that narrative is coming up about the idea of like investing in the masses, social services, which he claims to support, social safety net, that's when he bristles and gets into this conspiratorial mindset about where this money is actually going and what the intentions are behind it. And so that's why ultimately he's going to end up siding with the Epstein class consistently. And he's going to go back to that, and he's never going to be able to analyze the fact that the reason Epstein's circle wanted to go on his platform, but also the reason he was open to having those people on his platform, and the reason he's still having these arguments with people that want to downplay the crimes of Epstein, is because for the rich, for people in his class and above, defending wealth and defending the ability to accrue billions of dollars and more, it becomes a reflex, and defending the wealthy becomes a reflex. And so Joe Rogan participates in that just as much as any of these Epstein defenders. He reflexively defends the ability for billionaires to keep their money away from the government and the idea that government's just going to waste your money, so why would billionaires want to give it up? Joe Rogan professes this now, and there's no ideology in the world that defends Epstein and people like him and their ability to commit crimes more than that. If there's no accountability for people who are able to accrue enormous amounts of power and fun coupons, as Joe Rogan likes to put it, then those people are going to be able to get away with whatever they want behind closed doors, because there's no collective entity like the government of the United States, for example, that is powerful enough or willing to hold them accountable. That is fundamentally the problem. And it doesn't matter if it's Epstein or Elon Musk or fucking Joe Rogan if he's going to be the next billionaire. I don't know. The problem is the ability of them to accrue their wealth and weaponize it against the people at large. And until we start to cut against that type of individualism and towards a collectivism that can actually solve some of these problems, we're just going to keep seeing cycles of this sick and twisted shit, because this is what people are going to be able to get away with if they're not held accountable. And Joe Rogan is responsible for the defense of that network of people.
Me too close to, too much to do. The mission is too crucial. Shout it out from the rooftops until I lose vocals. Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity.